think that the new American President Obama, will change that relationship between North America and some of these more dodgy governments in Latin America?
Well, he made a very good start, as you might remember very recently when he went to the area. He caused quite a stir back home because he shook hands with Hugo Chavez. And what is a leader supposed to do?
You can't ignore the handshake.
No, but not only that, you can't ignore the country. He's at your back door, and you catch flies easier with honey than you do with vinegar. So George Bush's policies in Central and Latin America were obviously as failed as they were in the Mideast. So any change is a chance for better relations. But not only that, but Obama is a totally different kind of human being. George Bush was a thug. He was by and large, he was a mass murderer. That's what these guys did for a living. That was their idea.
Is that what you would call George W. Bush, a mass murderer?
If you took his profile and took his name off it and you didn't know who it was and laid it against all of the mass murders that we've had just alone in our country, it matched perfectly the idea of the outsider, the arrogance, the fear, and the bottom line, an unloved man. There was no love and certainly no joy in this man's life, period. So,
you mean in his personal life?
Obviously. You can't do what he did and be a happy, joy-filled person. He was about the business of killing other human beings. We know for an absolute fact, and we knew it before it happened, that's why we protested the war, but the attack on Iraq was a deeply personal vendetta against a guy that his father had some image of failure with, because he didn't go into Baghdad. He didn't take out Saddam. And and I said at the time when I was protesting the prelude to the war, when I was asked by a very angry reporter, did I think the president was a liar? And I said, well, of course he is. And he said, well, why do you suppose he wants to go into Iraq? Aren't there weapons of mass destruction? I said, no, there's mass communication, and the only weapons of mass destruction are the ones that we are sending in. And he said, well, why is George Bush, in your opinion, going in there? I said, frankly, I think he wants to hand Saddam Hussein's head to George Bush Sr. and say, see, Dad, I could do it.
Do you really think, though, Martin Sheen, it was as narrow as that? Because that's one of the theories that's put forward. But over the years, many, many people around the world, not least, great thinkers in the US, have tried to get to the bottom of Bush's reasons for invading Iraq, from all sorts of conspiracy theories to the control of oil. Nobody seems to have been able to come up, not even from questioning George W. Bush, as to why he really went in there. Do you think it really was as innocent, not innocent, as minor a reason as that? He just wanted to prove to the big old daddy that he could do the job?
George Bush is a bully, and a bully will only attack someone that he's absolutely certain he can beat. And in the whole configuration of that area, he knew Saddam was the easiest target. There's no question about it. If he really had what he claimed to have as his motivation to make the world safe for democracy, to coin an old phrase, why didn't he challenge North Korea or even Iran, which are legitimate threats vis-a-vis the nuclear business? No, this guy, his agenda was deeply personal. He had no leadership qualities. You could understanding him the night of shock and awe when he said he had no trouble sleeping, and understanding him the night in Baghdad when the guy threw the shoes at him. He had the power because the president, whenever he travels, there is it's a congressional law that the radius around the president of the United States, whoever it is protected by American law and American security. So the guys that jumped on the guy that threw the shoes at him were Secret Service, American Secret Service. And he was under the jurisdiction of the president in that news conference, and for just about, I think it's 80 to 100 meters around the president. And that's universal. And everybody that invites him knows that that's true. And so all he had to do to make a profound statement was to pardon that man, to order his release. He didn't have the courage to say he was sorry to the people of Iraq, but if he had had that much heart and that much imagination about how much that would have done for the people of Iraq and his fellow citizens in America, it would have been profound, because he would have said, in essence, I'm sorry, I did something terribly wrong. It was obscene, and I'm trying to apologize. The guy gave it to him when he threw the shoes. Yes. It was handed to him, just like an opportunity was handed to him when the three little girls were playing in London from Texas, the group, the Dixie Chicks, and they made a remark saying that they were ashamed to be from the same state of Texas as he. Now, a lot of us took a beating going out front against him, against this war, but very few took as bad a beating as that did in public. Their records were burned, their contracts were canceled, their lives were threatened, they had to hire bodyguards. Now, if that guy in Texas, that president who claimed to want to be a uniter, had any imagination, any humanity, any heart, he would have reached out and said, I'm sorry what's going on because you disagree with me. I want you to come to a barbecue at my ranch in Crawford. Please come. And if you can't make it, or if you don't want to come because you don't want to be seen with me, I'm still going to play your music because I don't want our politics to get in the way of your art. But he didn't have that kind of heart himself. That's not who he is. That would never have occurred to him. To see his enemies swing in the breeze was who he was. And all the people around him reflected that attitude. I'm certain, because it was so clear to me, that all the people around him and his cabinet and his staff despised one another. Because wherever they looked, they only saw a worse reflection of themselves. They were all reflections of each other. None of them were any better than the one next to them. The one exception was Coleman Powell. He was the only guy with any experience in the military or with war, and they used him up at the UN, which was the final building block to war, and then he was finished. You know, he lost his career, he lost his credibility, he lost his humanity.
Do you think that the majority of Americans now, Martin Sheen, recognise that the war in Iraq was wrong and that the reasons Bush gave were absolutely not the right reasons for invading this country? Because even when it began to emerge that Saddam did not have weapons of mass destruction, there were still many, many Americans who still believed it was the right thing to take him out.
Americans would support an American president if he invaded Ireland, for Christ's sake. You know, I mean, that's nationalism. That's one of our worst diseases for every country. I think every country swears to lie. It's called diplomacy. But everyone knows that. But when, you know, and it's whenever you go to war, if leadership in war has only to demonize an enemy, choose an enemy and demonize them, dehumanize them. And you can get America to attack anyone if you can dehumanize the enemy and make the Americans feel threatened, that these people have to be removed. It doesn't take a whole lot to do that because, one, while we don't always have the right, we have the power. And there's very few nations left in the world who will stand up to us.